of the City of Charlotte Redistricting Committee, and I'm calling the Wednesday, October 20th meeting to order. Thank everyone for joining us today, those who are with us virtually, watching online, as well as our committee members who are with us moving forward. Let's start the meeting by introducing those who are visiting with us virtually first. Could you please introduce yourself? And then we'll introduce those in the room that's joining us live.
Driggs, committee member.
Greg Phipps, committee member.
Dimple Ajmera, committee member.
Mayor Pro Tem Julie Eisel, just visiting.
Welcome, Mayor Pro Tem. And we'll introduce those that's in the room with us live in 280.
Good afternoon. Lena James, Deputy City Attorney.
Mac McCarley with Parker Poe.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Tom Jones, City Attorney's Office.
Rebecca Hefner, Innovation and Technology.
Thanks, everyone. We have our agenda in front of us. It's pretty straightforward, so let's get to work. The first item on the agenda is to discuss the public hearing and provide feedback. This is for information only. As everyone knows in the community, we had a public hearing on the maps at this past Monday council meeting. We want to thank all the residents from Hidden Valley who were there providing their feedback to the maps. There are a number of issues that I want to clarify today so we can make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of being factually correct. And one I want to start with is to kind of ask our city attorney to provide feedback on the issues relating to the Civil Rights Act of 1965, pre-clearance. Could you please speak to that and share why that's not relevant to the process that we're undertaking?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As was brought up at the meeting on Monday, there was this discussion about pre-clearance under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. As Mr. McCarley stated, that particular issue, and it's commonly referred to as Section 5 of the Act, was actually taken out and repealed by the Supreme Court back in 2013 in the case of Shelby County versus Holder, and that applied to those jurisdictions that had been identified by the federal government as requiring pre-clearance if they were going to make any changes in their voting patterns or voting regulations, which would also include changing of districts. So that section is no longer applicable per that particular Supreme Court action, but also it's my understanding that Charlotte was not one of the pre-clearance jurisdictions, so would not have been applicable even without the Shelby County Act. Charlotte was not a jurisdiction that required pre-clearance prior to changing its voting patterns or districts, and it is my understanding that they certainly here in Charlotte did not do any pre-clearance work in 2010, the last time you did a major redistricting. So that's the basis. It's a lot more detailed than that, but the gist is that section is no longer applicable, and Charlotte was not one of the jurisdictions that required pre-clearance prior to, and that's federal pre-clearance prior to making those changes to their districts.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Mr. McCarley, there also has been some emails in reference to the precinct location actually changing. Could you please speak to that for me?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a common misconception because we use the phrase moving precincts. Well, all we're doing is moving a district boundary on the map. Nothing about the precinct itself will change. The polling place remains the same. The people in that precinct still vote at the same polling place that they've been voting at. And the changes that the city is making are to the city council districts, not to any precinct boundaries or precinct polling locations. None of those change.
Okay, so citizens who are currently voting at Greenville Memorial AME Church as well as Hidden Valley Elementary will continue to vote at those locations?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Also, there were issues relating to the tax rate in Hidden Valley, that the tax rate will change because of the redistricting. Mr. McCarthy, can you address that for me, please?
I can. There is nothing about redistricting that will change the tax status of any properties. It won't change their assessed value. It won't change how they're assessed. It won't change the rate that's applied to them. It literally will have absolutely no impact on their tax liability for their property. None at all.
Thank you. Mr. McCarley, there was also some indication that the voting strength of the African-American community will be diminishing, and therefore not able to elect African-American representation in District 2, 3, and 4. Could you please respond to that for me, please?
Yes, sir. Let's start with the one in question, and that's 4. Today, that percentage is, I need my glasses. Excuse me, sir.
I need mine too, sir.
Yes, I need my glasses, yes. Okay. I thought I had it written down here.
43.9%.
Thank you. Okay, 43.9% today. And in map B1, it only drops to 40%. So literally less than 1%, 1%. It's not even 1%. In District 1, it increases from about 26% to 33%. So black voters become a significant influence in District 1 that they aren't today. In District 2, it remains about the same, which is above 50%. District 3 actually drops a tad. It drops about 2 percentage points in District 3. But District 3 also has a substantial Hispanic and other Asian and other population, so that the total of minority populations in District 3 is substantially more than the white population in District 3.
So it's safe to assume that under any of the maps that we have before us, that the African-American community in District 2, 3, and 4 could elect a candidate of their choice.
That's my belief, yes, sir.
Okay. I'll open it up to the committees in reference to anything that you heard that you think we should respond to based on the public hearing. The committee should know that there were a number of emails, questions that came in, and then staff has already responded to them in reference to questions about the maps specifically regarding Hidden Valley. And so the staff has responded to all the questions that we've received thus far. The questions that I highlighted were the ones that were most commonly asked. And so I felt it was appropriate that we start the meeting off by making sure that that we establish a foundation that everyone can kind of begin to make a decision from in terms of being factually correct and making sure that we're all dealing with the same facts. Facts are stubborn things, so we need to make sure that we all comprehend that. So the floor is open for comments from members of the committee relating to the public hearing.
Mr. Chair, it's Ed Driggs.
I think I have Councilmember Ajmera before you, Mr. Driggs, but you're up next.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Hidden Valley residents had reached out and they wanted to understand why they are being moved. That's the first question. And second, why are we doing redistricting? So, Mr. McCarthy, if you could speak to those, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Let's take the second question first. Why are we redistricting? The case law on one person, one vote allows local governments to be as much as 5% above or below the ideal district size for any given district. The ideal district size is determined by taking the total population of the city and dividing it by the number of districts. So in this case, dividing the total city population by 7. And that number is then the ideal district size. In this case, the only district that was within the tolerance of being 5% above or below the ideal size was District 7, which was 1/10 of 1% off. Its growth rate almost mirrored exactly the average growth rate of the city. However, districts 3, 2, and 4 were substantially above 5%. Districts 1, 5, and 6 were below. So it took moving people out of the largest districts, 3, 2, and 4, and moving that population into 1, 5, and 6 to equalize the districts in population and get all 7 districts under the 5% variance that's allowed. The second part of the question is, why did we move Hidden Valley? First of all, I determined early on that Hidden Valley was bisected by the precinct line between 42 and 82, and that therefore I believed that those 2 precincts needed to stay together. Whatever district they were in, they needed to stay together. There are not very many precincts that you can move out of 4 or 2 into 1 to move population. And as I mentioned, we were trying to move population from 3, 2, and 4. And as your chairman mentioned at the public hearing, we had to move over 30,000 people in population from 3, 2, and 4 into 1, 5, and 6. So there are very few precincts to choose from, and 42 and 82 are very close to District 1, and there were some geographic issues with moving precincts on the far eastern edge of District 4, and there was also some difficulty moving precincts, the precincts at the northern end that border any other district are relatively small and weren't easy to move. So honestly, it came down to numbers, and I needed to move a certain amount of population out of 3 into 2, and then 2's excess population plus 3's excess population into 4, and then all of that excess population out of 4 into 1, 5, and 6. 42 and 82 were chosen because of where they sit geographically and because the numbers added up correctly.
And is it fair to say, Mr. McCauley, that notwithstanding the fact that over 30,000 voters were moved from 2, 3, and 4 into 1, 5, and 6, that 2, 3, and 4 still has the ability to elect a candidate of their choice?
Yes, sir. They have no less ability today than with this map than they would today. The mild qualification I add to that is that the one that actually tends to lose a little bit more than the others is District 3, but because of the mix of population and voter participation, I think it still has the same probability of electing a black representative under the new plans as it does under today's.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Driggs.
I just have
I'm sorry.
2 more questions. So, second question that Hidden Valley residents have raised is the communication. What has been the communication process from the city to ensure that residents who have been impacted by this redistricting have been communicated to?
Yes.
Councilmember Ajmera, it's Jason Schneider from Communications. So I think at our last redistricting committee meeting, I walked through the communications plan. So at a very high level, we have done radio advertising. We've made a significant push. The term we use is earned media, so news media. We've had multiple press conferences, put out a lot of press releases, which has garnered significant coverage in a wide variety of the local news outlets here. And we've done a significant push by putting information onto that hub site that we had discussed in terms of having all the information on the one site. And then we've pulled every lever. We've used every social media channel in terms of Nextdoor, Reddit, Twitter, the high traffic ones that we typically use, but also some of the more targeted ones, and have used some targeted outreach through those. We've seen a lot of positive results from that in terms of how we measure in terms of traffic to the site, has been very positive. And then in terms of the public listening session that was held several weeks ago, we had hundreds of people sign up for that, and I believe we had more than 400 people tune in to listen to that. So we've been doing what I would consider traditional outreach, so earned media and paid media with the radio advertising, and then also the more new media, digital, across the board, and we've seen a lot of positive impact from that.
In addition, Councilmember Ajmera, we communicated directly with the Democratic Party, who in turn communicated with all the precinct leaders, including representatives from 42 and 82, and the councilwoman that represents District 4, Councilwoman Johnson, also outreach to leadership in the Hidden Valley community. Those are her words, not mine, and she made those statements at the committee meeting on Monday as well. And so,
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. One last question. We had an email from Parkview Neighborhood Association, Daniel Pentecost, and he's currently in District 3. According to the map, B1, he'll be moved to District 2. So, Mr. McCarley, could you please explain how you explain the Hidden Valley precincts? Could you please explain why those precincts were chosen to be moved out of District 3 to District 2?
Yes, ma'am. District 3 was the largest of the districts and was the furthest out of compliance when we started the project. The only two sides of District 3 that you can move population from are the eastern boundary, which only has 4 precincts along it, or the northern boundary, which borders District 2. The voters in the precincts that I chose to move out of 3 into 2, those precincts had a significant black population. Moving them from District 3 to District 2 moves them actually from a district with a black population to a district with a higher black population. So that didn't seem to be a problem. And then we had to move some others on the other side of 2 out to make the numbers work. The precincts that bordered District 6, 77 and 98 or 99, made no sense to move because they were dramatically different than the voters in District 6. It would have completely diluted the vote of those people unless you moved enough of them that you actually flipped the partisan balance in 6, which would have risked looking like gerrymandering. So there really weren't very many precincts to choose from to move from District 3 out, but we had to move close to 15,000, 16,000 people out of that district into a different district. And I thought the better choice was to move the northern precincts into District 2.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Ajmera. I just want to say for the record, I just got a text from Councilmember Johnson, who is monitoring the proceedings this afternoon, and she wanted me to make sure that I advised the public that that she reached out to the community prior to the public listening session in advance. So she just confirmed the comments that I made previously. So thank you, Councilwoman Johnson, for monitoring the meeting and chiming in. Councilmember Driggs.
Thank you, sir. I wanted to mention, I think the city attorney just referred to the 64 Civil Rights Act. I think I remember hearing reference to the 65 Voting Rights Act at the hearing, and I wanted to clarify that my understanding about the 65 Act was that it removed barriers to registration for Black people, that's what that was mainly about, and there was a dramatic surge in registration, voter registration by Black people, removing things like literacy tests and so on that were designed to bar them. So if somebody at the hearing was thinking that the 65 Act was applicable, that's really not relevant to the conversation we're having. That was about a different issue. And it was, in fact, as the city attorney said, the 64 Act that addressed the issue of ensuring that there wasn't a gerrymander to the effect that Black candidates couldn't get elected. And please correct me, attorneys, if I'm wrong about that.
If I misspoke, I was speaking of the Voting Rights Act, not the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but the Voting Rights Act, which I believe was 1965. And this particular piece, and this relates to the pre-clearance issue. Essentially, the federal government, I think out of the Justice Department, determined that certain jurisdictions had done so many negative things, specifically to target the black community, that they required going through this pre-clearance process prior to making any changes in their voting regulations. And that was the state of the law up until, for those particular jurisdictions, until the Supreme Court took that provision out in 2013. So I just want to be clear about that, and if I misspoke, I apologize.
That's all right. I just wanted to avoid any confusion on the subject of the two acts. But the point to emphasize here is that even if they were in effect, we would not be dealing with a violation of the acts, because the percentage representation of black people in the districts is very much in line with what it was before. And in fact, the most important change is that the advantage that white people have in District 1 is 1/3 of what it was before under a Plan B1, for example. So I think it's worth pointing out to the black community at large that some of the issues that were raised by people from Hidden Valley to suggest that there was a general effort in this process to discriminate against blacks are really just not true. And I understand that the residents of Hidden Valley are apprehensive about being moved into a district that is traditionally majority white. I think that will be less the case as a result of one of the maps that we might adopt. But certainly the suggestion that there was somehow a negative outcome for blacks in Charlotte as a result of what we're doing, I think is misplaced. And I wanted to reassure other members of the black community that that is my strong impression from viewing these numbers and on the basis of what Mr. McCarley said. The other issue that came up was Map A, and there was a call for Map A, again, from representatives of Hidden Valley, because that's the only map that doesn't move them among the ones we're looking at. And I just have to emphasize, as I tried to stress at the hearing, Map A was actually more of an exercise. It was an informational map that was created to show what the smallest number of precincts might be that would get us technically within the numerical bounds, but it was never really intended to be one of the candidates for final adoption, because it was designed around a criterion that wasn't actually on our list of criteria, namely to minimize the number of precincts moved, and it wasn't responsive to other criteria, as Mr. McCarley pointed out. So I don't think Map A is realistically is an alternative, and if we're not talking about that one, in spite of some of what we heard, there are many reasons for it. I think we need to be thinking in terms of B, B1, and C, and I believe those maps were constructed in an objective way to meet the requirements of redistricting without prejudice to anybody, and in fact, in my mind, do a good job of that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the comments, Councilmember Driggs. Councilmember Phipps, you've been pretty quiet thus far. Do you have any comments relating to the public hearing on Monday?
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to clarify first, though, was I think Mr. McCarthy indicated the percentage of the African-American population in district, in precincts, in District 4 was, I guess, 43 point something percent. And then he said something about 40%. I'm trying to figure out, to clarify, is that what the percentage drops to when Hidden Valley leaves District 4? Is that what the 40% represents?
Yes, sir. Pardon me. Yes, sir.
Okay.
District 4, after, if you adopted map B1, the percentage of black citizens, black population in that district drops from 43.9 to 43. So only 0.9%.
Oh, okay. but the black population in District 1 is like 30-some%, right? You said that it would go from 33 to about 36%?
It's actually better than that, Mr. Phipps. It rises from 26.3 to 33.6. It is a significant increase in the black population in District 1, and frankly, at 1/3 of the population would give black voters a significant influence in selecting a district rep in that district, particularly given that that district is, as I understand it, likely to have an open seat.
Okay. One of the common themes that I heard in the public hearing on Monday was that the Hidden Valley precincts moving from District 4 to District 1 really didn't have any. The speakers expressed the view that they did not see the commonality or the community of interest with them moving from District 4 to District 1. But you indicated, at least from your perspective, at least 2 advantages to that move. But I know, the people in Hidden Valley were not pleased with moving, so I don't profess that they would try to recognize any advantage of moving out of District 4 to District 1. But given the fact that it's on the line right there, I guess Sugar Creek cuts it right in the middle, going from one side to the next. Do you see any other advantages to them moving from District 4 to District 1, other than the 2 that you just mentioned on Monday night, being the influence that African American voters could bring to that district in terms of their increased percentages of the black population, and the fact that there's an open seat there? Does anything else come to mind that would more or less indicate some commonality in being a community of interest when they move?
2 things I would say in response to your question, Mr. Phipps. First is that we can't always follow community of interest. The thing that we absolutely must follow is to get the numbers to balance. So we had to move somebody from somewhere to somewhere else. And in this particular case, if we look at this on the big picture level, that is looking at it jurisdiction-wide, what this does is sort of the logical extension of adding black population to District 1 is that really means that there are now not just 3 districts in the city that have a good chance of electing a black representative, but I would say that District 1 now makes that list as a strong influence for the black population there, and citywide, that is an advantage if you're looking at the Voting Rights Act for the city. It's a jurisdiction-wide question, not a precinct-by-precinct question. So I think that this is a strong case for there being absolutely no violation of the Voting Rights Act, and in fact, a strengthening of black voter participation in selecting representatives to the city council citywide.
Good. All right. I'm looking at these maps right now. As you indicated on Monday, in looking at these maps and where the precincts are located, there was very limited options in terms of precincts to even move. Was there any other, if you toyed with this thing interactively, would the movement of any other precincts other than what we have on the existing maps make any sense to what we're trying to do in terms of meeting our objectives in this redistricting process.
Mr. Phipps, following that last committee meeting, I tried to draw some different maps that left 42 and 82 in District 4. But what you have to do is make some very odd-looking changes to District 2 to make that work. Because what you have to do is use District 2 to shed population, shed it through District 1 into 5 or 6. And District 2 comes out looking like an ink blot. It's already one of the least compact districts, but it looked absolutely awful after trying to make any changes that didn't move 42 and 82. And in additional answer to your question, let me respond to the specifics of Plan A and Precinct 77. If you're looking at a map, Precinct 77 is down near the southeast corner of District 3, and it borders District 6. And it's one of the 3 precincts that's moved in Plan A. But let me give you the statistics on Precinct 77 and District 6 so you'll see why that is an absolutely impossible move to make. Precinct 77 is 40.7% black, 45.2% Hispanic, and only 0.08% white. So moving Precinct 77 into District 6, which is 68.8% white and 11.7% black, is a worse community of interest violation, and frankly is in my view unacceptable. There was a pamphlet, a paper circulating that I saw a copy of that suggested that not only was that a good idea because it saved Hidden Valley in District 1, but it also would potentially tip the balance in District 6. That, in my opinion, if done for that purpose, would be gerrymandering. That is, manipulating the voting district boundaries for the purpose of tipping the balance. I think moving 77 into 6 is, for community of interest and gerrymandering reasons, not the right move to make.
Okay, Mr. Phipps, any more questions?
Thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say for the record as well, I know we talked, it's been a lot of time for the last 30 minutes talking about Hidden Valley. I just kind of went and counted the number of neighborhoods that's moving from one precinct to another, and I stopped counting at 60, right? And so this is not a particular issue about Hidden Valley. There are 60 communities throughout the city of Charlotte that's making this transfer. And as Mr. McCauley said earlier, and I said Monday night, it's 30,000 folks that we got to move, and so we're going to have to cause some disruption. But it's based on trying to get down to that one man, one vote, 125,000 residents per district. And so that's the hand that we've been dealt. And I just wanted to make sure that the residents of Hidden Valley specifically and the community at large understand the challenge that the committee and the council is under in terms of complying with the 10-year process of redistricting and the decisions that we have to make along the way. So if there's not any further questions in reference to the public hearing feedback, I suggest that we pivot to agenda item number 2, which is to consider the need for additional public engagement and or outreach. And so I open the floor in reference to that particular topic. I have my own feelings towards that, but I'll allow the committee to chime in first in reference to, do we need any additional community outreach engagement? I will remind the committee that we are under a deadline in terms of when we said we would land this plane for the mayor and council, which is November 8th. We are fastly approaching the end of the month. I remind the committee that we've had a public hearing as well as a public engagement session. I also remind the committee that we have an open email portal where citizens had the opportunity to email their questions. Staff has been responsive in terms of responding to them accordingly. So a lot of work has been done. You heard from our communications director in terms of what we have done to outreach to the community. We've communicated with a number of organizations thus far, and both parties. Mr. Driggs, we offered that to the Republican Party. You said you would take that message. I sent the same message to the Democratic Party. And so we're at a point now where we're looking at the clock and the schedule and the calendar. And so I say all that to open up the discussion in reference to how the committee wishes to move forward. Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, I think I detected a certain preference on your part in the way you set up that question. And I want to say I agree with you. My feeling is that the feedback we have received does not suggest that there's a whole lot of sentiment out there that we have not taken on board or thought about. So the listening session, for example, most of the questions, as I recall, were essentially informational. And I came away from that feeling that we're not way off base with our maps, that we were in the right general zone. At the hearing, the main issue that we heard about was the concerns of Hidden Valley. And I think they were able to air those concerns at the hearing. I think we have understood their concerns, and even if we're not able to respond to their request because of the greater needs of trying to make these maps work, I don't believe we'll learn more from extending that conversation. So I'm with you. I think that we probably have done as much as we need to in the way of outreach, and that we are in a position now where we can move ahead with recommending a map.
Thank you, Councilmember Driggs. Councilmember Ajmera, do you have a comment, questions?
Yes, so even though we can move forward with this process with a very tight time frame, I just want to make sure constituents can still use that mailbox to send us their concerns and questions till the adoption. So there will still be time for them to continue to ask questions and understand the process. Is that correct?
That's correct. The portal remains open. The maps all are still available. Staff will still respond to questions in reference to the maps that comes from throughout the community, because again, like I said earlier, there's over 60 neighborhoods that's moving. And so that process will remain open until the council makes its final adoption.
So Jason, if you could just give us that email box address again, so if constituents are watching this meeting, they can directly email that email address, and they can obviously reach out to all council members as well.
Hey, Ms. Ajmera, it's Donata Jackson. It's redistricting@charlottenc.gov, redistricting@charlottenc.gov.
All the guys in the room were stunned. Thank you, Donata. Councilmember Phipps.
Yes, Mr. Chair, as I can recall from Monday's meeting, there was a communication to those in the chamber that some sort of, listening session or additional feedback was forthcoming to those who attended. And I was wondering, when that was put out, what we expected to gain from those discussions, in as much as looking at these maps and tweaking them different kinds of ways did not yield the desired outcome that they sought. So I was curious as to what was our original motivation and intention of communicating such another listening session or feedback session in the first place, given where we are.
That's a very good question, and I'll own that one. Trying to be very open, honest, and transparent in terms of the process. It was an organization that we were going to try to accommodate. I spoke with that organizational leader, one of the leaders today, understanding where we are in the process, and they will yield to the will of the committee in terms of how we move forward. They do understand that all the portals that Councilmember Ajmera asked about is still open and has access to the public, so I'm not sure that it will cause any damage to the process if we were to not have another outreach session because of the portals and everything being open. So I was trying to be as accommodating as possible. Now I'm looking at the calendar, the schedule, and where we are in the process. It's probably time to move forward.
Okay. I think it's probably important to emphasize that even if we do vote today to recommend a map, that this vote is not an affirmation of the map, but only a desire, a recommendation from this committee going to the full council for their consideration. So any approved map would have to come after the entire council weighs in on a decision on a map.
Very true, Councilmember Phipps. Our job is to process the work, provide a recommendation to the Charlotte City Council, and the council in its wisdom will make a decision. Our goal, as we said earlier, right from the very beginning, is to make that decision hopefully on November 8th so that we can meet the deadline to submit the information to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Election by November 12th, I think. By November 12th. So again, looking at the calendar, we are right up against it. So short story, if we make a preferred recommendation today, the ultimate decision will be from the Charlotte City Council. And citizens still have an opportunity to provide input, feedback through all the open portals that will still be available to the public. Okay? So I think...
Follow up on that. Oh, sorry, Mr. Phipps, were you done? Oh, on November 8th, it's our business meeting, right? So is that going to be a public forum on that, on November 8th?
No, Ms. Ajmera, that is, we generally have public forum now, our last meeting, so the fourth Monday.
Okay, so we are not having another forum on the 8th, on the day of the adoption. However, the portal will still be open and council will still be able to make that decision before the final decision is made on the 8th, correct?
Council. So
Yes.
I heard yes, and let me ask it again so we all can be on the same page. So the night when the council makes this decision, that's a policy decision, so there'll still be an opportunity to speak? No? Yes? I'm not sure.
Typically, it's just in front of council, but I'll find out.
Okay. All right, so we will provide clarification on that in terms of how the council will act. Obviously, we want them to adopt a map prior to then, but in terms of the type of community input during that. But all the portals are open, and it would be nice if we can get that answer before we leave. So we won't leave that just hanging out there. And so Donata's going to make sure that we dot I's and cross T's on that before we leave. But yes, it is the desire, as we said right from the very beginning, based on having to provide input to the Board of Elections by November 12th for the council to take action relatively soon. Okay? All right, so I'm not sure whether we need to make it, Councilmember Phipps.
Yeah, I mean, I had a question coming in from someone, but I guess they're asking, would it be possible between now and the deadline where we vote, would it be possible for them to produce their own maps?
Well, The maps that the council will be considering will be coming from this committee. The committee has 4 options in front of us, maps A, B, B1, and C. That will be the maps that this committee will make a preference, a recommendation to the Charlotte City Council. Once that recommendation is made and delivered to the council can accept that recommendation and or do what they want to do, right? They can go in a different direction. So I'm not sure if it's a citizen or but the time for input and engagement in a formal way, i.e. the public engagement session, the public hearing has come and gone. The portals remain open. The committee stands poised to make a recommendation, and council will receive that recommendation, and it'll be their prerogative to accept it and or go in a different direction. I think that's pretty clear.
Yes, thank you. I guess, yeah, I guess they were indicating, if they wanted to have someone, produce a map someone else other than this committee, would that be able to be put forth to, the council as a map for consideration?
Not as a recommendation from this committee, no. Okay, so do you want to take a formal action, or by consensus, do we agree that we don't need to have any further engagement or outreach? I hear consensus, Ajmera, Driggs, Phipps, we're all on Graham, are we all in consensus that we ready to move forward? Okay.
Yeah, I think that given where we are and given the effort that we put through to tweak the maps as we have, that we should push forward a recommendation forward to the full council for their consideration.
Okay. All right, so by consensus, the committee agrees that there will be no additional public engagement and outreach session, that the portals of the email and the website and the email system, citizens still can provide their input, suggestions, and questions there, that staff will be responsive in terms of replying and answering those questions. And now we pivot to agenda item number 3, which is to propose draft map recommendations for the City Council consideration. Mr. McCarley, I would like to call on you to provide your expert advice. You are our independent consultant. You have heard the public debate in terms from our public engagement session, the public hearing. You drew the maps, and from your professional recommendations, we'll yield the floor to you for any recommendations that you want to give to this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start by saying that I can't recommend map A. It simply does not meet enough of the criteria. I think it, as Mr. Driggs correctly pointed out on Monday night, it was for informational purposes. It was to see if there was a way to meet the constitutional requirement of one person, one vote by moving very few precincts. You can meet the constitutional requirement, but I don't think you meet any of your other criteria well. So I can't recommend map A under any circumstances. The other 3 maps, if you look at them carefully, you'll note that they typically move the same grouping of precincts to achieve the numerical balance that we're after. 42 and 82 move in all of the other 3. 8, 1, 18, and 35 move in the other 3. My personal and professional opinion is that B1 best matches the community of interest rule because it reunites parts of East Charlotte that should be in District 5. That's the difference between map B and B1. B1 better aligns the Central Avenue corridor. So I would give the nod to draft plan B1, Mr. Chairman. It meets all the legal criteria. All the districts are within 5% variance. They're reasonably compact. All the precincts are contiguous to other precincts in the same district. B1 is the one that I think best meets your criteria.
Thank you, Mr. McCarley. The floor is open for conversation, debate around the recommended map from Mr. McCauley, which is map B1. The floor is open for comments in reference to that.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that that of the 4 maps presented, that we put forth map B1 as the preferred choice from this committee to head to the full council.
Is there a second? I second that for map B1. Discussion. I call the vote. It's been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Greg Phipps, seconded by Councilmember Graham, that we move forward redistricting map B1 to the Charlotte City Council for consideration. I will call the roll. Graham, yes. Ajmera?
Yes.
Driggs?
Yes.
Phipps?
Yes.
That motion is carried 4-0. I want to thank the committee for its time. If we can we take a small pause for about 2 minutes? We're trying to track down a answer to a question. We may have it. Women power is amazing, right? It's just amazing. She answers all our questions. Donata, the floor is yours.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. So the adoption of the map will be a policy item. What's in question right now is if the item will be able to have signups. And so the clerk is doing a double check right now to make sure, because since we did have an official public hearing, it may be that people cannot sign up, but we want to check the rules and procedure just to make sure. So what we can do is during the November 1st strategy session, we can make that announcement if folks can or cannot sign up for that item during that strategy session. Okay, Ms. Ajmera?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for checking on that.
Thank you, Donata. She answers all our questions for us, and your timing is perfect. So, Mr. McCauley, want to thank you for your work. Want to thank the staff as well for the hard work in terms of getting us to this point in the process. Committee, we do have a recommended map, which is B1, that the committee unanimously agreed upon. We will forward that recommendation to the Charlotte City Council for its consideration. All portals are still open. Emails, our redistricting website for citizens to continue to ask questions, seek clarification, provide input as we move along this process. So I want to thank everyone for their time and their participation on it. We may have some more communication out around B1, I would imagine, relatively soon. Even I think we ought to do another press conference at some point where we really just kind of drill down and talk about B1 in particular. So if there's not anything else, we've done an amazing job. It's now 4:29 in 59 minutes. Any questions, comments as we close out the meeting?
Move to close. Adjourn.
I'll second that as well. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.